I'm Sachin Dharashivkar. I am a founder who is playing with LLMs for a long time, and today we will be talking about developing user-friendly large language models. So sorry. And the subtitle of this talk is Introduction to Fine-Tuning Methods, Supervised Fine-Tuning and Fine-Tuning Using Reinforcement Learning. So let's I just have one question for you guys. How many of you have had heard of OpenAI before launch of ChatGPT? Awesome, we have full house of deep learning nerds. That's really amazing. So as all of you remember, when GPT-3 came out initially, it took us by storm. We were able to write poems, generate stories, and all of that, which was not possible to previous generations neural networks or any machine learning models. And as you can see with the different headlines, that plenty of people got amazed by it. People started to build businesses around it, but it never quite caught on. And the reason for that was, for most of the prompts, when you asked GPT-3 to explain things to itself, sometimes it went with building similar sentences rather than actually answering the prompt questions which user had asked. But then 8 months ago, ChatGPT came along and it captured imagination of the entire world. It captured the imagination of entire world. Within 5 days, ChatGPT got more than 1 million users. And even today, I think most of us are using ChatGPT for our day-to-day knowledge needs. And if I can show you the difference between these two prompts, when we asked GPT-3 to explain moon landing, it generated another similar questions. With some amount of prompt engineering, we were able to get good responses from GPT-3, but it needed prompt engineering skills. With ChatGPT, you didn't need to do anything, and it gave wonderful answers. And the major technological difference between GPT-3 and ChatGPT is fine-tuning, which was applied on the base pre-trained large language model. And today we are going to talk about what different sort of fine-tunings were done on ChatGPT, and that's the entire story of this talk. Before starting the talk, I just want to introduce myself and what are my fine-tuning / training deep learning experiences. I started to play around with deep learning in 2016. I started with deep reinforcement learning agents, and if some of you remember the Doom game or Wolf game, which we had played in our teenage years, around that, so that Doom game was a first-person shooter game. I trained an agent to play that particular game. Then in 2018, I interned at Unity, Unity's machine learning agents team, and helped them develop NPCs, non-playing characters, for the game of Overcooked. Then in 2019, I joined JP Morgan, and over there I worked on building simulators and agents to trade equities for high volume trades, where if you implement those trades naively, you will drive away the liquidity and cause lots of losses. So I was working on the financial domain with reinforcement learning. Then I returned back to Bangalore, and in my previous startup, I fine-tuned a large language model called T5 to generate questions, answers, and explanations to help students learn better. And nowadays, I'm exploring the applications of AI agents to build next generation apps. So let's dive deep into the recipe of training something like ChatGPT. As you can notice, even though I'm calling this recipe of ChatGPT, but figure shows llama to chat, because the underlying recipe is same, and ChatGPT hadn't given us too many details apart from a single blog post. So we will go and I'll explain how the entire ChatGPT or Llama 2 chat, these sort of chat models, which are amazing response generators, are made. So we first start with lots of pre-training data. This pre-training data is usually internet scale data with few TBs of just textual information. Then we do self-supervised learning and train a pre-trained large language model. This is Llama 2 base or GPT-3 or something like that. Your MPT, Falcon, something like that. Then we perform supervised fine-tuning on this pre-trained model. The aim of supervised fine-tuning is to get the style of question answering or following the instruction from users. It does nothing more than that. It just helps the large language model understand the style of answering questions. And from that, we get the supervised fine-tuned or instruction-tuned model. Once we get the instruction-tuned model, we use this model to gather human preferences. I'll explain in detail how we gather human preferences and all of that in some time, but just bear with me for now. And once we have this human preferences data, we use this to fine-tune using reinforcement learning. ChatGPT and Llama 2 have used a method called proximal policy gradients, PPO. Like for today's explanation, I'm going to show you another method called advantage actor critic. Both of these methods are very similar and perform equally well. Let's jump right in supervised fine-tuning. If some of you have played with MPT models or any other open source models, you might notice that usually we see either instruction models or chat models. Usually there is not much difference between these two models. The major difference comes from the way we curate our data set. And these are some examples of how our data sets for fine-tuning look like. For instruction tuning, we just give instruction inputs, and the targets are how our model should answer those particular instruction prompts. Comparing that with chat model, ChatGPT is a chat model, Llama 2 chat is a chat model. All of these models which we love interacting are chat models, and the advantages of chat models is that we don't have to give explicit instruction every time. We can have multi-turn conversation. We can ask ChatGPT to do something, check its response, and then ask it to change something or change the other thing or something like that. OpenAI introduced a chat ML format to show us how we usually structure our input and target pairs. This is, you start with system prompt, which is usually you are ChatGPT, you are a helpful and amazing assistant, yada yada, lots of knowledge cutoff and all of that, all of those things. Then we get user prompts, where user asks the question to the assistant. Then we have assistant prompts, but if it is a multi-turn data set, then we might have couple of user assistant prompts, and our last assistant prompt would be the target. I'll just show you, I'll just tell couple of really good data sets for doing instruction fine-tuning or chat tuning. Technically, for your own use case, you should annotate your own data set, but you can use these data sets to either bootstrap your curated data sets, or just use these things and do mix and match to figure out what particular mix of data sets work for your own use cases. For instruction tuning, FLAN collection works really well. Some of you might have used FLAN T5 or those models. They were all trained on the FLAN collection, and it contains collection of data sets, and it is around few million examples. Then Databricks generated a 15,000 instruction targets dataset called Dolly, and Evolve Instruct is a method to generate these datasets using different search techniques like DFS, BFS and all of that. And usually the models which were trained using Evolve Instruct datasets are called Wizard LMs, and Wizard LMs are usually better for coding tasks. On the chat side, Lima paper showed us that just having 1000 examples can give us really good chat experience. If we go a little bit ahead with Open Assistant dataset, Open Assistant has tree of dialogues. They have around 10,000 good quality dialogues and plenty more. Llama 2 showed us that having chat dataset of size between 25,000 to 30,000 is usually sufficient to get really good quality chat model with just supervised fine-tuning. I'll just show a naive implementation using PyTorch how you can do supervised fine-tuning. Please note that this is a really naive implementation. While training your own models, either use SFT trainer from TRL library with this data collator for completion only LM, or write your own PyTorch fine tuning loop which will give you even more power. So this is my supervised fine tuning notebook. Here we are just initializing tokenizer, dataset and system prompt. Then we are writing tokenize function. For tokenize function, I am again showing the chat.ml format. You are free to use any other like normal instruction tuning format as well, or make your own format. One additional thing which I am doing with my tokenizer is extracting this particular variable called k, because our large language models are usually decoder only, and in decoder only we are generating one token, and token is just another name for a subword, one token after another. So in our system prompt, we have something like the following is a conversation between. If after looking at our model predicts something apart from following, like if we just use the plain SFT trainer or plain like any trainer, it will give us some loss here. But we don't want our model to learn, hey, following is going to come after the in system prompt. That's not the job of supervised fine tuning. So we are getting this particular k variable out, which is going to tell us where system prompt and user dialogues end, where inputs end, and from where the targets start. By the way, how many of you have trained some sort of neural network? Almost everyone. That's awesome. I don't have to explain what is optimizer and learning rate and all of those things. So we extract the trained data set, shuffle it, tokenize it, then take particular model. I just took Pythia. For the example, you can take any of the pre-trained large language model, move that model to our device, get optimizer, get learning rate scheduler, and put the cross entropy loss, start model training. And this is our normal like PyTorch training loop, like PyTorch training loop. Here we are again extracting this particular k variable which was generated by our tokenizer. We are shifting logits which are just a step below before generating the probabilities. We are shifting logits by k minus 1 because k is the particular place from where the targets are going to start. So our k minus first logit would be responsible for generating the kth target token, and for labels we want to look for from k to the next one. So now we use normal cross entropy loss and do the backprop, and our model will train. But usually with having such a naive implementation, the major problem is we would run out of memory pretty soon. For a single 1 billion parameter model, if we load it in FP32, it will take us 4 bytes to just load the model, 4 bytes for gradients again, and if we are using ADAM optimizer, ADAM usually takes 12 bytes per parameter. So that ends up happening like the number of parameters we are going to go 20 times more in memory just for our optimizer, gradients and model weights. And our activations and batch size can skyrocket the memory even more, and like fine tuning even a 1 billion parameter model on 840 GB, we can still run out of CUDA memory. To solve this particular problem, we can try different things like mixed precision training, storing gradients in FP16 format, using different optimizers like ADAM 8-bit, and for activations we can do activation recomputation, or we can go with parameter efficient fine tuning. I think almost all of you then have trained some neural networks, you know what PEFT is, and you should have, like, you at least would have heard how LoRa works, or like LoRa is a low rank adaptation, and what we do over there is we just have very small number of extra parameters and we just fine tune those particular parameters. So we end up saving lots of memory. And how much lots of? So with the particular instantiation of LoRa, which is quantized LoRa, they can fine-tune 65 billion parameter model on a single 48 GB GPU with 4-bit info, like where model is frozen and we are doing backpropagation through 4-bit model. And before starting with reinforcement learning, I can take a couple of questions if people have some questions at this point.
Your experience, which step has been like the most time taking among all the things you covered so far?
Which step, like in just supervised fine tuning or supervised fine tuning, reward modeling and RLHF?
Till here.
Till here, so it's usually this is a single step. Curating particular data sets, if you want to curate your own data sets, is going to take you maximum amount of time, and it will take maximum amount of energy because you want really high quality data. For everyone, I'll highly recommend go and read your data sets, even if you are going to use like open source data sets, because they kind of tell you how your model is going to perform, because model is eventually going to copy the style from this particular data set and learn from them. So I have a question for you again. How many of you have some experience with reinforcement learning? Oh, still quite a few of them. For the rest of us, I'm just going to go over what reinforcement learning is once again. So reinforcement learning is a framework where we learn by trial and error. We have an agent which interacts with environment and gets reward from the environment, and the environment tells the agent how it can do better. Agent can be anything. Our large language model can be an agent. This particular humanoid robot can be an agent. Even I can be an agent. For now, we will consider, like I'll just instantiate this particular problem where I am training an agent to play chess game. To explain in more details how reinforcement learning in general works. So for an agent which is going to play chess game, this agent is just going to be a software program which will generate moves based on the moves other player plays. So here state is just board position, which piece is where on the board. That's the entire state. And in this particular position, our agent is able to observe everything in the state. For some different environments, that just might not be the case. So in those particular places, we have partial observability. Here actions will be which piece we are going to move where. Some actions can be invalid. Suppose if someone tries to move this particular camel, that action would be invalid, but environment will take care of that, and environment won't allow agent to make invalid actions. And reward can be, you can get reward at the end of the episode, that our agent went and played the game of chess. It either won, lost, or tie happened or stalemate happened. Or we can do some sort of reward shaping and give reward at either every step based on some heuristic, or whenever our agent captures some of like our opponent's piece, or if our agent's piece gets captured by our opponent, we can give some reward or penalty to our agent. And that's the whole formulation of reinforcement learning. There are only three major things: rewards, actions, and states. Now, here for the game of chess, it is very easy to understand where rewards come from. You either win or lose. But with respect to large language models, it's not really clear where rewards are going to come from. Like when you look at some response from like ChatGPT, unless you want to put on a hat of a teacher and grade every response given by ChatGPT between the score of 1 to 5, how are you going to know what's the reward for particular answer and what's not the reward for any answer? So, let's explore a couple of places from where rewards are going to come from. ChatGPT and Llama 2 are trained from human preferences rewards. We can have reward generated from AI, or we can use some sort of proxy matrix. For human feedback, let me ask, if some of you had seen these movies, let me ask, how many of you prefer Barbie? some of you, how many of you prefer Oppenheimer? Even less of you, so not that much strong reward to the model, but still. We ask model to prefer one response over the other, not to models, to human users, to compare one response with another and choose the one which is preferred by maximum number of users. And that is literally called human feedback, human preferences feedback. RLHF, reinforcement learning, we explored in the last slide. HF part is this: humans decide we like this thing, we don't like that particular thing. If you guys have heard of constitutional AI, which is a technique developed by Anthropic, rather than using humans to generate this sort of feedback, Anthropic guys used something called AI feedback, which is they asked their large language model, hey, these are the two responses. I want you to grade these responses based on these particular criteria. Select which one is better. And because these large language models are sufficiently smart, they can pick up which options they prefer, and that becomes AI feedback. And Anthropic trains their models using RLAIF. Proxymetrics. This is the last topic, but this is the last way where we can gather our rewards from. But first, when people started to use RL with respect to large NLP systems, they tried with proxymetrics because gathering human preference feedback or AI preference feedback is extremely costly. But if some of you guys have worked with translation models, we used to evaluate translation models from BLEU score. Technically, we train our models to optimize the BLEU score. In 2016, when Google came out with their Google Neural Machine Translation System, they tried to fine-tune that particular neural machine translation system using reinforcement learning on BLEU scores. Unfortunately, these proxymetrics, they don't work that well. So what Google found out at that time was model learned to optimize for BLEU score, but that optimization didn't really translate in the real world. People still preferred normal Google Translate. Let me just move to code again and I'll show you how reward modeling is done. Again, this is earlier part is just the boilerplate code. With tokenize function, here we are gonna tokenize both of the responses. For this example, I am showing you binary comparison. Technically, you can have n number of responses and compare those n number of responses from users. But here we will just have binary comparison where input ID is A and attention on ask A, which will be from response A, and this will be from response B. We will again take the data set, shuffle it, tokenize it. Now let me show you the reward model. Reward model is gonna again use the similar SFT trained models which we had talked about previously, and we are just gonna remove the top classification head which is on top of our base model. That classification head is responsible for generating probabilities of generating next token. We will remove that particular head and add another head to generate reward score. This another head is just gonna be your regression head, it is just gonna output a single number. So let me just show you this line of this last line of reward models forward pass. Here, as you can see, I am doing detach because in reward modeling I just want to train the head. I don't want to touch the underlying base model. Base model is just there for knowledge base, and this particular head is just going to assign reward based on the knowledge it has. Also, here I am making an assumption that every particular token in generated response weighs equally to have equal importance in the reward score. You can have your own heuristics and you can say, hey, the start of my answer is much more important than middle part of my answer, or end of answer can have much more importance, and you can design your own reward functions this way. Again, this is boilerplate code which all of you guys would have seen before because you have all trained some sort of neural network before. Now let me show how we are calculating loss with respect to reward modeling. We have two responses. Both of these responses, using both of these responses from our reward model, we got two different scores. Now, depending upon which of those responses were winners, we will go ahead and subtract, pardon my loser and winner analogy, but we will subtract the loser response score from the highest response scores and do log sigmoid operation on that and multiply that with -1 and that would be our loss. Rest of it is again boilerplate training code which you all have seen, so I will go back to the PPT once again. Again, same with this particular notebook, this is a naive implementation. If you want to train your own models, own reward models using this code, take this code and make it more scalable. I just wanted to show how the underlying things work. Evaluating reward models. Having a good reward model is as important as training properly with reinforcement learning, because reward models are the place from where the most of our performance is going to come from. The way we take care of data sets, it's the same way we should take care of training our reward models. This diagram I'm going to show from Llama 2 paper again, where they had shown for some test prompts, the responses generated by our model, how average rater scored those responses and how reward model scored those responses. As you can see, there is a linear relationship between these two, and we want this sort of relationship. And it is not trivial to get this relationship, because if you remember our loss function before, we were comparing two responses. Here we want to use that comparison to generate this particular linear relationship. And once we have this amazing, really good reward model, if you don't want to fine tune with reinforcement learning, you can just use this reward model and still improve your model's performance by either of these two techniques. Either you can do best of n sampling or rejection sampling. You can just generate n number of samples, ask reward model to judge all of these samples and take the best out of them, and you are done with your best of n sampling. It's as simple as that. For rejection sampling, it's again equally simple. Here we are going to take reward model, get the best output from reward model with best of n sampling, and then fine tune on that using whatever fine tuning we had done previously. So reward model plus supervised fine tuning, we can still go long distance. Does anyone of you have question about reward modeling? Sure.
So a reward model, right?
Yeah.
This looks like is it possible to do a logical let's say a decision tree or any such other kind of steering the model in a particular direction? Is it possible through just reward modeling, or does it happen through our human reinforcement learning from human feedback or whatever?
Yeah. So with reinforcement learning and human feedback, technically there are two steps. First is reward modeling. And second, this is reward modeling. Here reward modeling happens. And second is fine tuning. So for steering our model's output in particular direction, technically you can use something like decision tree or something like that. But the major problem with that is, our large language models are much better at generating any output than classical decision tree, random forest, or all of those things. So you can use those things, but if you want to steer it in any particular direction, even in reward model, you can either ask humans to judge the responses based on certain particular criteria where you want to steer the model on, or otherwise you like along with this particular like reward model, like along with where we are gathering human feedback, you can ask humans that how much better this particular response was from that particular one, and you can add some amount of heuristic which was designed by you, change the distribution of that particular human preference data set, and then do reward modeling. Someone also had a question.
So those best of n sampling and reject sampling,
Yeah.
are there any open source models which follow that?
Llama 2 chat does rejection sampling.
Okay.
So in Llama 2 chat, like they had done 5 rounds of RLHF tuning.
Right.
The first 3 rounds were technically done with like rejection sampling, and after that they added PPO. For best of n sampling, nobody is doing that like in large scale, but the major reason behind that was there are not that many good reward models out there. Before, actually there is only one big reward model which is out there, which was trained by OpenAssistant, and OpenAssistant gave up their efforts to do RLHF because their reward model wasn't trained properly. So unfortunately today there are not that much open source reward models out there to do best of n sampling. But if we are training our own models, I'll highly recommend to do at least reward sampling along with supervised fine tuning.
So is that those two things don't work as good as PPO, right? It's not as good as PPO, right?
They are not as good as PPO, they are somewhere in between.
In between.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yes.
How do you choose the size of your reward model you try to place?
So reward model is technically same as base model. We are just changing the head. So on base model, on top of base model, we have a classification head which is gonna like generate the probability of next token. So we remove that head and add another like linear regression head.
It's not scalable, right? If I train a 50 billion parameter model, we cannot have a 50 billion parameter model.
You can, because you would have literally same reward, like reward model would be the same as your base like SFT model. Only when you train reward model, you will only train the head. Only train the linear head, which is gonna generate the score based on activations like hidden states which are coming out from the like hidden states from the base large language model or SFT large language model.
Is there any use of the reward model during query time, or is it mostly just useful for fine tuning?
Is a reward model only used for like fine tuning, or can it also be useful during query time? Like if I have a reward model and like
Yes.
it's like an unfine tuned model, but I'm just making queries. Could it be useful?
Yeah, it can be useful. So in best of n sampling, technically if you have reward model, you can use your model to like sample 10 different responses at inference time, use reward model to judge all of those 10 responses and pick up the best response with the best reward score and return that back to the user. But if you want to do rejection sampling or PPO, that would happen at training time, fine tuning time.
So instead of RLHF, if we tried RLAIF,
Yeah.
will there be any difference in the working of it, and is there any scope of having an additional feedback loop to improve the AI feedback itself?
Yes. So to improve the AI feedback, like we can improve the AI feedback by again like fine tuning reward model, and these things are usually iterative. So we don't do SFT, then do reward modeling, and then do PPO or any other RLHF. What we do is SFT, reward model, PPO. After doing PPO, we again gather some more human preference feedback, do reward modeling again, do PPO again, and then this becomes a loop. Like you can keep improving your model.
So, but some sort of human feedback would in any case come into.
In case of like RLHF, you would need human feedback. Once you think your model is good enough and it is able to like if you had seen, there was a recent paper where some people had used Amazon at Amazon Mechanical Turk. Some people use GPT-4 to generate responses. So if you are at that level, you can just like for particular domains you can check with like human feedback and you can go with AI feedback. But again, it totally depends on your particular domain as well.
How do you eliminate some false positives or false negatives sort of creeping in when you when it comes to human feedback? Because maybe at runtime, right?
Yes.
I have some customer-facing application. I ask
Yeah.
the user whether you are satisfied, dissatisfied with the response. Maybe they don't. The answer was actually satisfactory, but
Yes.
you got a DSAT. So how do you sort of reconcile some of?
Oh yeah, like so you can do couple of things. You can like if you have large amount of data set, you can hope that in the aggregate like generalization will take care of that because 5 or 10% of those things would be wrong. Or what you can do is like you can add human in the loop and ensure that the feedback which is coming from your users, you can have some annotators who are making sure that the chances of some wrong feedback coming in is much low. So it totally depends on your use case that how great reward model you need for that particular use case. Like are you okay with like having some amount of like mistakes or some amount of hallucinations, or you want more and more accuracy?
So, is there any intuition for with a reward model? How much of it is fine tuning the actual model versus like hyperparameter tuning, like the max P,
Yeah.
the max tokens, temperature, all of the perplexity and all of that?
Yes. So for that particular thing, like I would highly recommend like when you are generating when you are doing all of these things, rather than fine tuning like top P or top K, don't do all of that. Just fine tune on temperature because you want more and more creative responses over time. And like at inference time, you can play around with top P, top K, and other parameters to figure out how to get even better responses from the model. But while doing all of these things, fine tuning on those particular parameters might be over engineering, I feel. I think we will take one last question and then we can come back to questions afterwards.
I have one question.
Sure.
So if time permits, can you also talk about the rejection sampling of how the rejection sampling actually works in this case? Is
Sure.
it the usual problem of choosing a proposal function here, or is it something as simple as a bootstrap? Like I'm not very much clear on how rejection sampling is used here. Not spending enough time.
Sure. So like with rejection sampling, like anyway, like we suppose we have a prompt data set of like 1,000 prompts. For each prompt we generated 10 different responses. We asked reward model to judge all of those 10 responses and took out the best response from based on our reward model's completion. Now we have input prompt and the best response. We generated this data set again and did supervised fine tuning on this particular data set, and that is rejection sampling. Let's just continue with fine tuning with reinforcement learning, and we can come back with questions once we are done with reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning methods. Usually we define there are two major categories of reinforcement learning methods: model-based methods and model-free methods. In model-based methods, we try to understand how the environment operates. But actually learning for an agent, how the environment operates is a lot harder. So suppose I don't know how many of you are MCU fans, but if you remember the Avenger Endgame scene where Doctor Strange sat down and computed all the probabilities of all the events happening, that is technically model-based reinforcement learning. But none of us have time stone, and because of that, doing model-based RL is super hard. We are just going to focus on model-free reinforcement learning, where we don't know how environment is going to operate. We will do our best. We will put out our best action and let environment give us reward and optimize based on that. With model-free RL, there are it is divided into majorly two types of methods. First are value function based methods, second are policy based methods, and these two methods also interact with each other and we get actor critic methods. So I'll again go back to some RL terminology here with the help of chess game. Like what is value? So at this particular, like this is our current state. Suppose white is gonna like play the next move. Like if white moves either like here from here or camel to this position, it's a mate. So white is gonna win this particular game. So value of this particular state is 1 for the white. White is supposed to win the game. So value function is literally for this particular state what I anticipate my reward would be. That's the value function of that particular state. There is something called action values as well. So here we are choosing based on the particular state how much reward we expect to get. With action state, this thing, like this is our particular state. But suppose we decide to play this particular knight over here. If we do that, we are not winning the game. At least we are not winning the game in the next particular like chance. Then black has a chance of doing something like this, and then white is again back to the like its game is again equally poised. So for this particular, like at this state, if we do this particular action, the reward goes significantly down, and this particular is called state action values. These are denoted by Q as well. And using these values, if we decide, like if our agent decides, oh, I am in this particular state, if I do this, I'll go into that state, and how much reward I can expect in that state. And if agent makes decision based on these particular computations, those are value-based methods. In policy-based methods, it is more intuitive, it is more reflexive. Agent won't think what I can expect in the future, what I cannot expect. Agent would be like, oh, in this particular thing, I think this is the best action for me, I'll play this. That becomes policy. Policy is usually mapping of at this particular state, I'm going to play this action. This mapping of state to action is called policy. And in actor critic methods, we start with policy, but we help the policy with some amount of feedback from our critic, which is based which takes values from state value functions. So this is the classic policy gradient theorem, which is a bedrock of all the almost all the policy-based methods. And here I just please disregard this part. This is just the objective function. I want you to look at these two terms: log probability, del theta with respect to log probability, and this action value, this is q pi. Technically, we can replace this q pi. Q pi is going to tell us what we expect in this particular state. If we take this action, what our future returns are going to be. This is estimation. If we replace this with what we observe in real world or real world for the agent, then this particular algorithm becomes something called reinforce. Here we are doing log probability of theta, so we want to increase probability of taking good actions, because for good actions this q function would return bigger numbers. For bad actions it will return smaller number. We want to increase the probability of taking good actions, and we want to decrease the probability of taking bad actions. And we are taking log probability because log of 1, when we are certain that we are going to take this particular action, that's not much more interesting. So log of 1 is 0, and when log of 0 is minus infinity, because if particular action is not going to be taken by our agent, then it's again not that much interesting. And if that action gives us tremendous good enough reward, and we will eventually take that action a bit on this side of the curve. I'll showcase RLHF using A2C, which is advantage actor critic. So I didn't explain the term, what term advantage mean. We looked at Q values, we looked at V values. V values is expected return from the particular state. Q value is expected return at a particular state taking a particular action. Advantage is taking a particular action at this particular state. How advantageous this particular thing was for me, rather than my average case of whatever I would have done in that particular state. So advantage is technically Q minus V. That becomes our advantage. Again, I'll go down with the standard this thing because this is boilerplate code which you guys had seen in the previous slide as well. Here, like I'll showcase how we are gonna how we instantiate our policy network. Our base model again is gonna be same base model which we have taken from supervised fine tuning. And this base model we are here gonna fine tune it again using reinforcement learning. This linear layer, I am gonna use this particular layer to calculate value. It will come in the forward pass. And reward layer, remember we had trained reward layer, reward head in reward modeling. We are loading that particular reward head from those weights. This generate response is again we are scaling our logits by temperature, taking out probabilities from the logits, then reshaping the probabilities, sampling from those probabilities, and decoding them to actually generate the response. The interesting part happens in the forward function, where we use the base SFT model, get the output out from which we are going to use the logits, take the particular value out. Here I have used to do ReLU for having the value in positive. That's a design decision I made, you don't need to. It totally depends on the context. We generate the response, which is this particular function. This particular function returns us M, which is multinomial distribution, response tokens, whatever tokens we outputted, whatever tokens we sampled from this particular distribution, response, which is a textual response, and the value. We are calculating value particularly just based on the state. We are not looking at the completion. Completions would be the targets. We are just calculating the value based on our input prompt. Also, please notice, even here when we are calculating value, we are using detached function of PyTorch, because for value also we just want to train a value head. We don't want to make changes to the underlying base neural network by value loss. We want to make those changes using reinforcement learning fine tuning. This get reward function is just going to use that linear layer to extract the reward from the model. This is again the same boilerplate code. The only thing is here you can look at, there is another model I am instantiating called reference model. Also, I am using two different optimizers. First is normal optimizer, second is value optimizer, and these two different optimizers are taking two different parameter sets. Here this is SFT parameters and this is just value head. Also, to train the value function, we are using mean squared error loss, which we use for any regression problem. We got the batch, we put the batch through the model, got the multinomial distribution, sampled tokens, textual response and value, what our model before generating response expected it should get reward for this particular input prompt. Then we generated all of those things for reference model as well. The reference model is the initial model which we are not going to fine tune, because we don't want to fine tune and enter into some weird territory with reinforcement learning fine tuning using reinforcement learning. We use this reference model to make sure our model is somewhere close to the reference model. Now, using this particular textual response, we decode it and then generate the tokens, pass these tokens to get out the particular reward which we which we got by generating this particular, by getting this particular and generation, how much reward we got. Then loss is interesting again, because here we are adding couple of different things. as you had seen in that particular equation, we are doing log probability of those response tokens, multiplying them with whatever reward we achieved and subtracting them by the particular value, whatever reward we expected to achieve. And we are doing the KL divergence term to ensure our fine-tuned reinforcement learning fine-tuned model is not going too far from our SFT model. We want it to venture out, but not to venture out too far. We are doing loss dot backward. We are doing value loss dot backward also, which is mean squared error between whatever value we expected and whatever reward we got. Rest of the code was similar boilerplate code again. RLHF is important for a couple of things. Llama 2 chat paper shows that just fine tuning it with Flan, they got this sort of like reward distribution where lots of rewards were at 0 and then it was somewhat uniform with like 1. After they did like annotation with their own chat data, the distribution started to shift a little bit toward getting proper responses. Then doing RLHF V1, like first level of RLHF, they got much better responses, and by iterating with RLHF, the distribution started to shift towards better responses. So using RLHF, we can get much better responses, and also RLHF helps our models to reduce the hallucinations. That's the reason OpenAI is selling that their secret sauce is their RLHF, and even Llama 2 showed that you get better responses and reduce hallucination using RLHF. And that's it, guys. So that's my talk. To build better models, please fine tune your base large language models, and RLHF is amazing. It can generate better responses and reduce hallucination. Thanks a lot. You can reach out to me on like my Twitter or Substack. I like write on Substack about pre-training.
You have 5 minutes for questions.
Sure. Like
For RLHF, how many samples do you need for training?
for training reward model or reinforcement learning phase.
Reinforcement learning phase.
So for reinforcement learning phase, the more the better. And for like technically you don't need much data for reinforcement learning phase. You just need initial prompts, because responses are anyway generated by our like base model, like SFT model or RLHF tuned model. So you can like technically have somewhere from like 1,000 to 10,000 or something like that prompts. Even like more the better. It totally depends on how good your reward model is. The better your reward model, the more number of responses you can cram into the RLHF phase. But if your reward model is not that strong, I'll recommend like do that iteratively. Like don't over optimize on that particular instance of reward model.
And for reward modeling, how many samples, like training samples?
It keeps on iterating, but like what Llama 2 people did, they had around 2.5 million samples total. But again, that is for Llama 2, and Llama 2 is like ChatGPT. They have entire world's knowledge. For your own use case, you might not need that much, like 1,000, 10,000, on the order of 10,000, like 10,000 to 100,000 should be good, but it totally depends on what sort of domain you're operating in.
How do you evaluate whether your reward model is good or bad?
You can evaluate whether your reward model was good or bad based on like you can have a test set of some prompts, generate responses using like any SFT model or RLHF model, ask human raters to judge those responses based on some sort of like 1 to 5 rating or 1 to 7 rating, something like that, and then map that rating on the graph like this, where like x-axis can be your rating given by human raters versus y-axis can be your rating given by reward model. And if you have this linear relationship between these two axes, then your reward model is pretty good.
Can you explain the value thing again, the expectation value, the last one we had?
Oh yeah, sure. here reward minus value, right? Oh yeah, so here value is before we generate the output, before we generate the response. Just by looking at the prompt, we are asking our model to figure, like, to guess what sort of reward we will get on this particular prompt. So we are kind of helping model to be self-aware. For this particular prompt, we are going to do pretty well. For these particular prompts, we are not going to do well. And we are doing, like, the most intuitive way of thinking of this is like, if there are too many easy, like, samples in your data set, you don't want to over optimize on that, where your reward model knows, yeah, I know this particular question. You don't want to get too high reward for those particular things. That's when you're adding this baseline. For the things where you know, maybe I don't know much, and you're getting good reward, then that is a very good signal for your model. I didn't know, but this particular thing was helpful. That's the intuition. It helps reduce variance.
So the reward.item is the reward model we train?
Yes, reward.item comes from reward head. This comes from value head. Reward head was trained in reward modeling phase. This is trained here, value loss.backward, where we are trying to get values as close to reward as possible.
So we have many hyperparameters here, right? We have
Yeah.
the data for the failed divergence, and we have the temperature for generation and all this.
Yes.
So let's say I'm on a compute budget and I'm on a data budget as well.
Yes.
How do we like do the hyperparameter tuning and find the most optimal set of values for these things?
I'll highly recommend start with a smaller model, get some intuition of how these parameters interact with each other, and once you are there, once you understand how these different parameters interact with each other and how they then move on to the, like, bigger model and spend your compute budget on bigger model then.
But maybe with scale, like the scaling laws coming into picture.
Yes, they do come into picture, and like that's a problem with, like, for every deep learning practitioner right now. How do you do these things? But still, I would suggest, like, training somewhat smaller models is helpful to build the intuition, and then go on and build, like, billion parameter models.
Last question.
Sure.
So, regarding the reward model, so task is relatively simple. So either we need to rank it or we need to give some score.
Yeah.
So can we use a smaller model there, like regarding the number of parameters? Like?
Yes, but technically, like, our reward model is somewhat smaller because here we are just training. Let me show you. Because we are doing this particular detach, we are just training this particular layer. So we are not training that many hyperparameters. Like, technically, whatever, like, hidden size is, which is going to be some, like, either 1000 or 2000 or 5000. That many number of, like, parameters we are going to fine tune or we are going to train.
And regarding RLHF and RLAIF, so
Yeah.
We have some parameters like toxicity and other parameters.
Yes.
So can you just differentiate how it is? How can we adjust the reward model there in
Yeah.
cases?
Yeah, sure. So, like, actually here, what Llama 2 did for this particular thing, they trained two reward models. One was for, like, helpfulness and one was for safety. If you care more about toxicity and all of those things, you can, like, train n number of different reward models and then have some sort of, like, heuristic technique to how to add those particular rewards and pass the final reward to our, like, outputs.
But in case of RLHF, can we train just one model and then do the ranking based on multiple parameters and then fuse the...
Yes, so technically you can have, for RLHF the base model is same. You can have different reward models. If you want to merge all of these components in a single reward model, that can also work, but sometimes, like, usually there is a tension between helpfulness and safety. Like, the responses which are really helpful might not be safe. The responses which are extremely safe are mostly not helpful. So you have to balance those things. So, like, if you don't want to train too many models, you can go ahead with a single model, but then your job becomes harder to curate the data set and figure out what sort of data is going to come in. Thanks a lot, guys.